where I thought I would start with you is if you could tell the students a little bit about how you decided to become a lawyer, your background before you went to law school, and tell us a little bit about what brought you to Mercer.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody, and happy Law Day to everyone here today, and also a happy Lawson New Court competition today as well. I grew up in New York, enlisted in the Navy in 1973, and through events that I cannot recall, I ended up at Annapolis. And while at Annapolis, met a fellow from Dothan, Alabama. I'd never heard of Alabama or Dothan, being from New York. Met a girl in, as always in these tales, met a girl in Dothan. She's still with me. And ended up leaving Annapolis, went to Auburn where she was. And my plan had been to, I was an English major. My plan had been to write the great American novel and to teach English. And somehow in my senior semester, a quarter at Auburn, I ended up reading Anthony Burgess's book called Gideon's Trumpet, about the case of Gideon versus Wainwright, which established under the Sixth Amendment a right to counsel when you were in jeopardy of imprisonment. It was a fabulous book written by, not Anthony Burgess, Anthony Lewis. Anthony Burgess wrote A Clockwork Orange. Totally different vibe. But in any event, read that book. I was fascinated by the law, and then began to try to determine what was involved in being a lawyer. I was enrolling for a French course, and sitting there looking at, and this is in my senior semester, looking at what pre-law was all about. And it seemed that I had taken most of the courses that I needed to take. And so I went in there, instead of talking about French, and I realized this is not a particularly good plan of becoming a lawyer. This is very accidental and serendipitous. But instead of asking about this French course, I said, tell me about law school, what's involved, how long is it, well, what is there, an admission test? And they said, yes, it's an LSAT. And I said, well, when is that? And he said, it was Thursday. I said, all right, I'll take that, and then I'll think about this. And I came home and I said, Helen, I think I've decided to become a lawyer. She said, well, you're just as nutty as I thought you are. And I ended up from that then going to a law school fair at Auburn University in 1978. And I met from this law school one of the last hippies, a guy by the name of Forrest Mauston, this long-haired fellow with a beard, very gentle, peaceful soul. And he was responsible for recruiting new students. And I met him in a tent at a law school fair there at Auburn. And what I liked about him was that he was a very laid-back guy. There was a spectacular picture of this building on the cover of the brochure that he had. But most appealing was that it was only $10 to apply in 1978, and I was on a limited budget. And I liked him, and so I committed that I would in fact apply. I could at least spare $10. And I did. I applied to Mercer. Came here, well, actually, about a couple weeks later, I got a letter from someone at, I think Joe Claxton, as a matter of fact, saying that if I would come to Mercer, they would pay my tuition here. I said, well, this is just too good to be true. We have to go look at this Macon. We have to find this Mercer. We must take it further inspection. And I'm very easily impressed. I came riding up this hill. I saw this wonderful building. I came here and met teachers, some of whom are still here, including Hal Lewis, and I met Mike Sabbath, who I thought was like the old man of the sea, but it turned out he's only 2 years younger than me, and he's gotten younger since then, from my perspective. But I met these wonderfully engaging people that had taken an interest, in my judgment, an unfair interest. I was not any rocket scientist by any means. Why they particularly picked me out to give me a scholarship is, I mean, I did okay on the LSAT and I had decent grades, but I was no stellar scholar. But nonetheless, they had reached out to me, and I said, well, let's take a chance on Mercer. Came and absolutely loved this law school, loved the education that I got here, and then loved the whole idea of being a lawyer and noodling through problems and cases. Ended up as a summer associate at King & Spalding. I didn't realize at the time that King & Spalding didn't hire summer associates from Mercer, but I had understood that Judge Bell had gone to Mercer, and Bob Steed had gone to Mercer. I'd seen these pictures and paintings around here and figured that, well, that's where I should go next on this journey. And went there, had a good summer, and I've been there ever since. So I've been in the big firm life, I say big firm life, since 1981, or 1980 as a summer associate in 1981. When I got to the firm, there were about 80 lawyers. And now there's more than 900, and we have offices all over the world. And it's been a long and changing journey, but it has been extraordinarily fun. And it all began because I walked into that law school tent at Auburn and met Forrest Moston.
All right. Well, I don't think we have any aging hippies left on the faculty.
Well, yeah, except for maybe you and I.
Yeah. Yeah, let's keep that a secret. Why don't you talk a little bit about just kind of an overview of your career at Kingsville, the kind of things that you have done, and as you do that, if you could talk about the joy you found in that life, which I know you have found.
Right.
Again, there's a little bit of an antidote to what is perceived as a negative message. It's not intended to be, but is perceived as a negative message from me about large law firms. If you could just kind of talk about your life in the firm, what you've done, and so on.
Sure. Well, when I started at King & Spalding, the regimen was that after 7 years, you would either be elected a partner or you'd be asked to go on to your next adventure. It was an up or out system back in that time. Not only was it up or out, but the screening process was careful enough so that folks that were hired, there was an expectation that they would have the right set of skills, both legal intellect, energy, enthusiasm, work ethic, and personality, to ultimately become a partner at the law firm. There was at least an expectation going in that that would happen. And I certainly had that expectation from the moment that I walked through the door, which I think added greatly to the way in which I viewed the world, because the way in which I viewed the world, when I walked into King & Spalding, I intended that my entire career should be there. There's a different journey there, a different journey now, I think, for many students coming to law firms. But that was my vision from day one. I saw myself as part of the fabric of the firm from the moment that I walked in there. That's something of personal vision. I frankly think that wherever you go, if you go to your own firm, your mid-sized firm or big firm, if from the very beginning you see yourself as what you are, the lawyer responsible for the client, the lawyer responsible for thinking through the problem, and not as some cog in some big machine that you feel dominated by the man, you will enjoy your adventure much more wherever you go. Now for me, as you can see, my journey to the law at the beginning was a product of naivete and serendipity, and no planning, and complete accident and collision. And so it was with my law career in the early days. I began working on Title VII cases. My very first case was against my Title VII professor, Hal Lewis. He a genius professor, one of my favorites. He taught me very well in employment law, and too well, because we went toe to toe for 12 years, and I prevailed. And he never forgot it, nor have I. I would always feel bad when I would write. Therefore, the plaintiff's claim has absolutely no merit whatsoever. And of course, it was Hal Lewis and Charles Mathis were the plaintiffs on the other side. It was a very interesting Title VII case. I say that took 12 years. But during that 12-year time, of course, I did other things, including losing my hair early on. Maybe it was in like the first week. It just went away, and I became the bald lawyer I am today. I started on that case working on documents, reviewing documents, doing what you would think the little new lawyer drone would do. And I ended up arguing the case on appeal in the 11th Circuit. The lawyer for the company that we worked with was Brown & Williamson here in town, a woman by the name of Betty Foley. At first, she was highly suspicious of me and would think my task was to review documents and that's about it, and would not listen to any advice that I had. Would check everything with Frank Jones. a dean, a legend of the law. But over that 12-year period of time, she began to see, and I began to learn and grow get a little sense. And she began to turn to me more and more and more and more as her advocate, till finally, at the end of the case, the most important moment in the case, I ended up arguing to uphold the denial of class certification and plus our bench trial victory here before Judge Owens many years ago. So I did Title VII to begin with. We did several large-scale investigations with Judge Griffin Bell, who, as many of you know, was the Attorney General under Jimmy Carter, one of the great lawyers of the United States in history, in my opinion. He passed away on January 5, 2009 at age 2009 at age 90. He was very influential and important in my life as a lawyer. I got under his wing and did many things with him, including large-scale investigations for a long period of time. And I have spent maybe the last 15 years largely engaged in the defense of tobacco litigation, which is quite difficult and has grown more and more difficult, very challenging. But all throughout, I've been a trial lawyer in all of these various respects. After my 7th year, I was elected a partner at the law firm, and I've been a partner since 1988, June of 1988. Now, new lawyers coming into our firm over that period of time, we went through an evolving process. To make partner got harder and harder and harder. We began having a scaled model where you would have non-equity partners and equity partners. But we also began to expand opportunities for people who were at the edge and didn't make partner, but wanted to have a career at King & Spalding. We needed to find a way to do that. And so we have. The firm has evolved in a number of ways so that we now have lawyers from project attorneys to staff attorneys to associates to counsel to junior partners to senior partners, a whole range of opportunities for lawyers in a variety of areas. I started in a single litigation department. That department is now split into 6 or 7 or 8 different teams. And we have offices not only in Atlanta, but in Washington, in New York, in Houston, and in Charlotte, in San Francisco, in Silicon Valley, in London, in Singapore, in the Mideast, in Paris, in Frankfurt. And lawyers in these various offices either do litigation or they do deals, and the law practice has evolved. I've always thought of myself from the very beginning of the law practice as the person responsible for what I do each day, for when I come to work, for when I leave, for how hard I work, for how diligent I am, for how thorough I am, for how often I check on the client, for what ideas I think of. I think of myself as an individual lawyer inside this big law firm. I think that's extremely important for all of you. Whatever you do, whether you do it for a solo practice, a mid-firm practice, a government practice, that you continue to recognize that what's happening here in law school, you're in charge of how you're doing. Whether you're succeeding on your exams, how hard you're studying, all of that is dictated by you. There's no firm telling you to do that. There's no boss telling you to do that. It's you. You're the boss who's telling you to do that. And that is the attitude I have always had, and I've always told kids when they come and they've interviewed me, to come to King & Spalding, I've said, you're in charge. Yes, there's work to be, consider the firm sort of a big river of work. It's your job to find what you think your niche is, find your mentor, help your mentor find you, but always remember that you're in charge. And as a result, I have had an enormously fun time in the law. Can't tell you how much fun I've had. Fantastic.
Yeah, you mentioned Mr. Jones and Judge Bell, and from time to time over the course of the semester we've had occasion to talk about mentors.
Yes.
And how important it is. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about Judge Bell and about Mr. Jones and about what they meant to you over the course of your career.
Yes. Well, they were fantastically able lawyers, but they were also fantastically able people. And they had great affection for the young lawyers that worked with them if they thought that lawyer, he or she was giving their all, and that they could count on him and rely on him. And Judge Bell was known for, he'd get a matter in, and he'd hand it over. We would always call his cases the Children's Crusade, because we felt like we were like little kid lawyers. And Judge Bell would get these very important matters in. He used to be in the Attorney General, and he'd just hand them to us. He'd say, here, take care of this problem. And you need to take care of this problem, figure it out, come back to me and tell me what you figured out. And we'd go off, and we'd have to figure it out. I remember in 1981, I'd been at the firm for 6 months, and Judge Bell took me up to the Department of Justice. And I knew Judge Bell had been the Attorney General. He had been the Attorney General when I was in Annapolis. In fact, Rumsfeld had been the Secretary of Defense when I was at Annapolis in his first go-around. I met him there back then. But in any event, Judge Bell took me up to the Department of Justice. We were there to talk about a Title VII case and the discrimination against female and black teachers in the county that starts with a C. That's escaping my mind. Anyway, I thought the deal was he was going to go up there and talk to the director of the Civil Rights Division, and I expected to have no role whatsoever. When we got to the Department of Justice, it suddenly hit me that Judge Bell was a true celebrity, and that these people at the Department of Justice loved him as much as I did, and I'd only known him for 6 months. And that we stopped at everybody. He knew everybody. The most remarkable thing about him was he would see somebody and say, Judge Bell, I don't know if you remember me at all. And Judge Bell would say, sure, I remember. I enjoyed working with you. And your mother's from Valdosta, right? She makes those little lemon cakes. It was extraordinary, the man's mind for people and what he would remember about people. He was beloved. We went up there to this meeting. We talked to the head of the Civil Rights Division about not bringing a claim against our client, the school down there in that county. His name's escaping me, can't believe it. And he said, there's no reason to bring a lawsuit. We can resolve this amicably. And Doc will tell you the facts. He'll give you a quick summary of the facts as to why that's the case. Now, Doc, the first time Doc heard that he was going to say anything was at the end of that sentence when the period came. I had no idea. So I, coughed and stumbled, but nothing. Notes, nothing. But Judge Bell knew I'd been telling him all kind of stuff. He knew I could tell him somebody about something. And so off I did. And that was his way of mentoring people, was to give you a shot. It could have been disaster. And I'd seen situations where he gave people shots, and they just didn't do too well. And he would, he would mumble about it, tell them you got to do better than that. And but his way of doing it was by letting you sink or swim, and being a great friend and supporter to you. Frank Jones was the lawyer's lawyer. I have never seen a better writer, a more diligent person to marshal the facts, a more fantastically able oral advocate. And in fact, when he retired, I wrote a poem about his retirement, and I tried to get the image of how much respect he commanded from clients and from judges, and they would just be riveted to him. And they knew he was a man of great integrity, and he taught by example. But two stories I like to tell about Frank is we were flying from Atlanta to Los Angeles for this case involving the placement of cigarette commercials, believe it or not, before the running of movies. You get in there to go see the latest movie, and here comes the commercial for cigarettes. Now it seems just so anachronistic. Well, as fate would have it, some lame film house, probably with a cause in mind, ran one of these cigarette commercials before a 12 noon showing of Snow White. You got all the little kiddies packed in there, and they're, oh my gosh, here comes the cigarette commercial. Well, you can imagine what took place after that. Lawsuits were filed. And we had to go, and we were trying to unravel some of these transactions. And we were getting ready for deposition. I'd gotten these notebooks together. One of these notebooks would kill you. And I had like 3 or 4 of them. They were huge, and they were heavy. They had multiple thousands of tabs in there and all kinds of information. And I knew the flight was like 4.5 hours. And my plan was to tell Frank Jones everything that was in this key notebook. We got on the plane. We were sitting in first class. It was on a Sunday. And I knew Frank to be the most, diligent of lawyers. I knew he's gonna, so I got out one of these notebooks for me, got out one for him, and I said, I'll start explaining this. And the flight attendant came by and said, it was like noon on Sunday. He said, can I get anybody anything to drink? And Frank said, I'll have a vodka martini. I said, well, you have a vodka martini? I can't believe this. And then I had never seen Frank have a vodka martini. And they said to me, what do you? I said, no, I'll just have coffee. I'd probably been up endlessly getting these notebooks together. So the flight takes off. I'm getting ready to open the notebook to go through it, and the movie comes on. And the movie is Splash. Remember this movie? I love this movie. And Frank says, let's watch this movie. I said, my God, I got this notebook. We got to go through it. That was the very human side of Frank. And one other story about just how much respect he commanded. Betty Foley, who I previously mentioned, they went to a hearing before Judge Owens in 1981. They got done with the hearing. Betty and Frank came out onto the courthouse steps, and Frank said, I will go and get the car, and I'll come back around here and pick you up and drive you to the Atlanta airport so you can fly back to Louisville. And she was with Joe Popper, also a local lawyer. So they're standing on the courthouse step. Frank goes to get the car, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, doesn't come back. Betty's trying to figure out where. Joe says, no, half an hour. They wait on the courthouse steps, half an hour, no Frank. Finally, Joe Popper puts him in her car, takes him back to Atlanta. Meanwhile, time passes. That was like about 3. At about 11 o'clock that night in Atlanta, Frank Jones sits down on his bed to retire for the night, and he goes, holy crap, I forgot Betty. So he had gotten so focused. That he got in the car and drove all the way back to Atlanta without getting her. Now, she thought this was the cutest story. If I had done it, I may not be here talking to you today. But so that's another of the human aspect. And I'm sure he was thinking of what was the next fact on the road. But Frank Jones was the most meticulous, best lawyer I've ever seen practicing, and he taught by example.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned a couple of times representing the tobacco companies, and that can't be easy. I mean, they're not popular entities.
Right.
We've talked over the course of the semester about representing unpopular clients in some sense, and usually it's some notorious criminal and so on. But in a similar sense, you represent an unpopular set of clients. What's that like?
Well, it's been very interesting. I started my career working for Brown & Williamson, but I was doing this Title VII case, an employment case. It was not the defense of cigarettes. In fact, it never even occurred to me that there was this whole litigation out there swirling about product liability. I didn't even get involved in defending Brown & Williamson against product liability claims until 1994, in the so-called third wave of tobacco litigation. Personally, and intellectually, I did not think that smokers, with all of the information that's out there, both through common knowledge and through the warnings on the pack, should legally be able to bring a claim. I also thought intellectually and personally that the Federal Cigarette Labeling Act preempted these state law tort claims. Those are my personal views, and of course they happen to align with my client's defense. We entered into a world in which a couple of significant things happened. One is a paralegal working for our company was trained on various documents. We were collecting documents, reviewing them, and we were training the document reviewers as to what issues were hot issues, what documents might be problematic documents, what documents were privileged documents. And this paralegal, an ex-drama teacher, working on our document project, not King and Spalding's, but in other firms, ended up stealing these documents and releasing them to plaintiffs' lawyers. That made the press. It drove a craze of tobacco litigation. And I've been involved ever since. And what it's required is simply focused attention on the law, making the best argument you can make. And it's been challenging but rewarding work, and it happens to be done by some of the best law firms in the country.
Obviously, practicing law is not the only thing you do. You have some avocations. The students have read your article in Life in the Law. Would you mind talking a little bit about that and about how you got started doing that and how it fits into your life as a lawyer? How on earth, as a senior partner at King & Spalding, do you have time to do anything else?
Yes, that's very interesting. Well, I grew up in the 60s, and there was great affection for singer-songwriters, and I had great affection for that kind of music. Loved that kind of music. Picked up a guitar when I was probably 14, began to learn to play. Wrote my first song at age 19 or 20 or so, but then began focusing on my studies, focused on a legal career, and for the first 7 years, in fact, that would take me to 88, I didn't begin writing songs again until 1992. The first 7 years of my life at King & Spalding were very absorbing. I worked very long hours, not because somebody was telling me to, but because I had so much work that needed to be done, and needed to be done well, and it required a substantial amount of effort. I can barely remember some of those years, but I certainly wasn't picking up the guitar and writing any songs. I did, in 1982, write a song called Who Took Our Eyes Away. It was my sort of attempt to deal with the fact that I was abandoning art and focusing on the law. I wrote that in 82 after I'd been practicing law for a year. But in 1992, an interesting thing happened. My friend and partner and the co-editor of that book, Judge Duffy, we were standing out in front of the building where we worked, and for some reason we were talking about guitars, and he told me that in 1968, his father had given him a Martin guitar, which he never played, which he put up in his attic, and it had never been touched. I had never held a Martin guitar. I had only lusted after them. And I said, really? You have a Martin guitar? It's up in your attic? Can I look at it? Can I take a look? Yes, I borrowed it from him. He claims that 6 years later he had to file a replevin action to get it back from me. Also, my sister-in-law was visiting on one occasion, and she accidentally kicked a hole in it. And I took it to Eric Clapton's guitar repair guy, and he fixed it beautifully. I mean, you couldn't tell. But Judge Duffy's the kind of guy that knows there's been a hole in his guitar. So he's always given me hell about it. But it was that guitar, the beauty of that sound, the accidental collision with music again, that started me on this road to trying to write music. I also heard the songs of a fantastically literate, brilliant songwriter, David Wilcox. I don't know if any of you have heard his music. I would urge you to. Don't spend a minute listening to mine and listen to his. It's great stuff. Anyway, I listened to it, was inspired. It took me back to the desire to write, to convey emotion, and to convey what I was thinking, both humorously and seriously. And I began writing at a heavy pace. And I think in about 93 or so, I would go into a studio dressed like this. There'd be long-haired guys in there. There'd be the scent of things that shouldn't be the scent of. And I would sit down and put up the mic, and they said, okay, we're going to do take one. I said, no, I got 10 songs here. We're going to record them all right in a row. You just put the thing on. I'm going. They said, no, you got to separate. You got to do the guitar track and the. No, I said, I don't do that. I'm just straight ahead. Oh, I got 10 songs. I got 4 hours. Let's go. And I was an unusual customer for them. The guy was a great producer. He produced my first record, which was Choices and Chances, which was songs that were written over about a 10 or 15 year period. But my real pride and joy was my second record. And by the way, if you want a copy of these things, just write to me or email me and I'll send them to you. They're on iTunes, but I wouldn't buy them. I'd take a listen just to see if you're interested. Listen to a 30-second clip. Interestingly enough, that 99 cents you pay, I, as the songwriter, owner of the song, owner of the record label, the agent for the artist, the whole package, I get 59 cents of every time you buy 99 cents. Amazing to me. So I end up getting these checks for $14.13, $7.06. I give them all to Helen. I say, see, I paid off, Helen. It really did. But my pride and joy record is a record called Second Chances. And my idea here was to take these songs that I've written over this period of time and really get the pros to do them. And I had a little bit of money as a result of my practice of law that enabled me to do this. And so I ended up hiring the best of the best. I had the piano player from Foreigner produce half the record in Chicago with artists and singers that he had. And then I had Ben Wish from New York, who produced Mark Cohn's Walking in Memphis and other records. Genius producers who, in addition to being genius producers, they had connections to the most fantastic musicians and studio musicians. Eugene Ruffalo, who sings 6 tracks on that record, he and I are now very good friends. Just does a masterful job. But Zeb Katz, who played bass for Elton John, plays on that first track, Second Chance. It is a beautiful record. I hope you will listen to it. It's good with a bottle of wine, the whole bottle, and a set of headphones. There's lyrics in there. It tells the story of all this. I'm very proud of that, of the way that record came out, because it sounds very professional. And it's just been a joy to do. And I'm glad that I didn't start doing it when I was an associate, because it was distracting. I mean, a project like that can end up taking some time. So in a year, I might have spent 400 or 500 hours on each of those records. And we just recently did a concert at Eddie's Attic in 2009 and released a live CD, double album, sort of like the White Album, Beatles album, but not quite as good, called Songs and Stories Live. And it has some humorous stories on there, including some of the things I've told you here today. But it's been a great joy to me. I remember I told you I started out wanting to write the great American novel. And if I could get the first sentence, I might get going. But the music has allowed me to write things that I think are meaningful in a compact way, and to dress them. There's a magic of the combination of words and music. The words alone could just be dribble. I try not to write dribble, but they could not be the greatest thing in the world. They're not the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. But when you combine it with the right chord changes, the right melody, it gives the words, the message, the music, just some kind of mystical power to it. So I've just very much enjoyed it. My firm has encouraged it. I have played at our firm retreats to just rousing applause, as you might imagine.
Especially from the associates.
Yes. Oh yes, the associates just love it. Or pretend to. But as a result, I've been involved in booking entertainment for our firm for various things, and I end up I give away a lot of these CDs to friends, and it's also a great thing for clients. When you come into my office and I welcome any of you at any time, come visit. On my desk I have a series of the CDs that I've done. I've actually been involved in maybe 5 or 6 CDs. The French, believe it or not, did a tribute album to James Taylor's Sweet Baby James that came out in February of 1970. And so in February of 2010 was the 40th anniversary of that album. And the French loved James Taylor, they loved Jerry Lewis as well. But in any event, I ended up doing, Eugene Ruffalo and I sang on one of the tracks. We sang Blossom on that 40th anniversary Sweet Baby James tribute, which is, I think, a decent track. Hard to find. You got to go and type James Taylor online French. You can find it out there. But in any event, clients could come to visit. It settles them down. they think like, oh, this guy, he's got many interests, it calms them down, and I end up giving them as gifts. People remember you by it. So in a way, it advances the law practice.
Well, and it certainly helped your practice, I think, in the Southern District when you wrote the anthem all across the Southern District for the judges.
Yeah, that was a great deal of fun. That was in 2004. I was just turning 50. And David Hudson from Augusta said, Doc, will you come and play a set of music for the Southern District judges? And I had not played a set of music since 1974 when I had hair. I mean, I write all these songs, but in secret. I wasn't out there performing. I said, absolutely not. I will not do it. He said, well, Bob Steve, you know, he comes at these things regularly and makes a fool out of himself. Why won't you? And we'll make a donation to Mercer. You've got to do it. I said, all right, I'll do it. So I came up with a set of 10 songs, half that I wrote, which of course would hit the audience totally cold. They would never, you know, you hate to go to a concert to hear all these originals. And then I did half covers. Now to spruce myself up, I did get the piano player from Paula Cole. Rakia Diggs happened to be an associate at our firm, and she had been on tour with Paula Cole when she had done that cowboy song. And Rakia Diggs is this great piano player. So I knew however it sounded, it was going to be coolness happening behind me. And I was trying to think of a song that I could write that would be, you know, about the Southern District or something, but nothing would come, nothing. And it got to be the day of the event. I woke up, I had an idea for a couple of verses, no, a verse and a chorus. And I said, well, if I feel this show going down in the tubes, I may bring this out sort of as a hometown favorite and say, I've got this song for you about the Southern District. And I told Rakia, basically, here's a lead, here's a chord sheet. So we were working along, singing the show. And about 6 songs in, I thought it was going okay, but I figured I should pull out this thing. Since I just wrote it that morning, it was fresh on my mind. And I sang it. And they clapped, great. Get to the end of the thing, and the tape was rolling. And the chief judge gets up there and he says, I have been in the Southern District for 63 years. And never have I been so touched. And somebody yells out, well, it's about time. And he said, never have I been so touched by this song. I remember we would go to the TikTok in Swainsboro and have coconut pie. And he went through all these illusions. I had none of that was in the song. I had some simple stuff about Augusta was a nice place, and the song was, when you find your home in Georgia, you're Georgia's native son. It's actually not a bad little song. You should, I think might be on my website, but in any event, which is www.legalguitarist.com, just to show you, totally modern. But anyway, I do the song. They said, Doc, would you please play this song one more time? So we do. We repeat the same verse, repeat the chorus. Rakia plays along beautifully. I go after the fact. I listen to that thing. I listen to what he said, and I tried to write the images and stuff from his speech into a new verse and take it to the studio and professionally record it. So I'm talking to the man who knows a little about everything, Judge Bell. I'm telling him I'm writing this song about the Southern District. He said, "You're not from the Southern District." I said, I know. He said, what do you know about Southern District? He said, you got rivers in that song? I said, no, I don't have any rivers. You can't have a song about Judge Bell said, you can't have a song about Southern District. Rivers? I said, well, what are the rivers, Judge? He said, the Okmulgee, the Altamaha, the Savannah, and the Oconee. I said, you got to be kidding me. How am I going to get those into song? So I totally forgot about it. I had a 50th birthday party shortly after that. Judge Bell was there, and he said, have you finished that song yet? I said, well, not yet. He says, you got the rivers in there? I said, well, no, not yet, Judge. In fact, I forgot what you told me about the rivers. And he was left-handed, and he always had a fountain pen, and he ripped a little piece off the menu, and he wrote on there in his little left-hand scrawl the names of these 4 rivers. And I said, thank you, Judge, yeah, I'll get those rivers in there. And I put it in my pants pocket. And about a a month later, maybe it was in my jacket pocket. And a month later, I reach in here and I open this. Oh God, those rivers are in there. And so I ended up. It inspired me. Wrote a little bridge. And now one of the better parts of the song is this bridge that talks about how I love these damn rivers. In any event, all across the Southern District, exactly right. We then printed it up and sent it out there. And as a result, I'll see people from Brunswick and aren't you that guy that wrote that song about the Southern District? Yes, sure did. And I credited it to Rakia Diggs. I gave her credit. Me and Judge Bell. In fact, I walked into Judge Bell's office and when he was 85, I said, Judge, it took you a long time, but here's your first song. You've written it. And gave him the CD of it.
Well, I was there when that debuted. I was there at that meeting, and the chief judge had tears in his eyes.
I did not know that.
Oh yeah, I was part of that meeting. He was very tough.
Did I ever send you the actual disc of the?
No, but I haven't sent you 59 cents either.
No. I need to send you because what I then did, I got the layout of the Southern District, and I got a picture of some seagrass, and printed that onto a CD, and I have his speech from that night. And then he says, will you please sing that song again? And instead of doing my lame, the guitar and voice thing, then you hear this beautiful studio recording. And it sounds very professional.
Okay, well, I want to get a copy of that. I'm going to get out of the way and let the students ask you anything they want to ask you. I bet there's some questions.
Please
here.
do. Fire away.
What questions do you all have? Yes, sir.
You said early on in your career when you were an associate at King & Spalding, your life was fairly consumed with the law.
It was.
And we all hear stories about how crazy life is as an associate at one of the mega firms. Mm-hmm. What was it for you? How many hours were you working? And were the partners really as brutal as everyone hears?
The partners were not nearly as brutal as everybody hears or as everybody portrays. And the pace, in my case, and I think most cases, is self-imposed. It's what I felt you needed to. Here I felt I had a client's cause. I had law to be learned. I had facts to be argued. Typically there were discrete tasks like answering interrogatories. And in a complex case like my Title VII case, that took a lot of interviewing of people, compiling the information, writing out the answers in an appropriate way. What would my work days be? Normally, 7 till 10. Then other days, I would go around the clock. However, I was a big believer in if I had done several of these long days, 7 to 10, I would just take a day off. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't make a big deal of it. I took to heart my message to you all that I am my own boss. I would leave. Some days I would be there. I'd get there at 8 and I'd leave at 4, or I'd leave at 3 if I'd been working for a long time in a row. And at no point did anybody say I have to be in there for regular hours at a regular time. There was no pressure put upon me to put on the work on the weekends. Although I will confess that my recollection from beginning as an associate till, even years after I was a partner, I would work most every weekend. That's because the workload, I thought, demanded it. Now, let's compare a couple of circumstances. There were lawyers who did not work that hard. They were more efficient. They had another view of life. As you said in my chapter, I talk about people who were doing politics, they were doing bike riding, they were doing hang glide, whatever they were doing. I wasn't doing any of that. But that was my choice. It wasn't because the firm was telling me, you must work this hard. And their particular model, and many of them made partner under their model of how they got things done. They were maybe more efficient than me. Now when I look at the world, I'm now 57. I've been practicing law for 30 years. I usually don't work any weekends, ever. I find I'm very astonished at myself for this, but I don't, and I haven't for about 5 or 6 years, maybe longer than that. My typical day now is 8:30 till 6. Many times, I don't get out of the house. My wife constructed a very nice office for me upstairs, and so I'd sit down there at like, 6:30 in the morning and start on the computer. Oh, and one more thing, I'm gonna go in the office in a minute. I never make it. I never make it to the office. There are still, I think, associates that get into the office late, or sometimes don't make it, they're working on a brief or working on a project. It's very much, at least at King and Spalding, self-directed. Ask yourself, what's your study regimen? How do you design it? Who controls it? Who made it up for you? I'm sure it all comes from you. You've done it yourself. That is how it is in the big firm, particularly if you insist that it be. You insist to yourself that you're not going to be run by somebody else's vision of what order is. If you think you've got all your work done and ready and lined up, and don't think you need to do any work on a Friday afternoon and a Saturday, Sunday, fine. You're your own. That's fine. So long as you're getting the client's job done. I tended to be obsessive perfectionist, and I would work endlessly at things. I would rewrite and rewrite briefs till I thought that they really hummed. I took great pride in legal writing. I took great pride in trying to craft an argument that I really thought was persuasive. I took great pride in trying to, if you read the first paragraph of a brief that I wrote, you would know what the case was about, you would know what my key arguments are, and you would know whether you're going to rule in my favor or not on that first page. And to do that takes a lot of effort. It takes writing it once, writing it again, honing it, getting rid of words. So there was a lot of that involved. But I worked a tremendous, I would say on average, 2,400 hours a year. Some years, 3,000. In my partner years, last year I worked 2,200. But there were a few years ago when I was a little bit slower, I worked 1,300. Felt like I was on a vacation. I was on a vacation. It felt like that 1,300 hours is barely kicking it. And you have cycles within your practice. But I think an average today, no matter where you go, whether you're a solo practitioner, you go in a mid-level firm, big firm, about 2,000 hours a year billable. That's going to take you probably around 2,400 hours in the office to get there. And it's manageable. And if you have something important and exciting to do, and you're charged up about it, and you don't feel like it's like some chore, you're really charged, you're trying to write the best brief you can possibly write. You're trying to make the best deposition outline you can take. You're getting ready tomorrow to make an argument that is so powerful, so persuasive, so compact, so well thought through, that you're energized by it. The hours fly by. You have fun with this. The idea of, yes, we're going to make money from the law, it's going to be our livelihood, but my view is you should embrace it and say, this is a challenge. I love doing this. Now if you say, I can't stand doing this, and that's what you say every day, then let's get a new gig. Because if you don't love it, if you're not passionate about it, you'll find it to be a strain on you. But if you are passionate, the hours will fly by. I guarantee it. It will fly by. Another sort of balance of life things. I have 2 daughters and 4 grandchildren. My 2 daughters were young in my early burning years of being a churning urn of burning funk out in the law. And I can barely remember their little years as little souls. Now I have a granddaughter that lives with me, and she is 10. And I remember everything about her. I could tell you what pants she wore when she was 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. But I can't remember those details about my own daughters from the pace that I was keeping myself at. So, and I think that was a little too crazy. And so you got to find the right balance. You've got to find the right balance. If you believe me that you're in charge, and insist that you're in charge, and be passionate about your assignments, And if the one you're working on is boring, okay, look for the next good one that's coming out there. What else is in the firm? What other work is in the firm? What else is out there to do? And keep yourself engaged. You'll find the time to fly by. Other questions? On any
We got
subject?
one right over here, Doc.
Yes, how are you?
When, since you work so much, what's your best advice for maintaining your personal and family life? Because we're all obviously going to be working a lot.
Well, you have to marry a very good girlfriend or boyfriend. And Helen has been a very understanding soul. I think you have, as demanding as you have to be about doing your work and getting your job done, you have to treat that as a priority as well. And you have to say, no, there's certain limits. And if you really think you need to spend another 12 hours on getting ready for this deposition, but it means you're missing the father-daughter dance, well, you're not missing the father-daughter dance, period. There's some things that are not negotiable. My kids didn't do a lot of sports. I think I was at everything important, I hope. But I know guys that their either sons or daughters were great athletes, played softball, soccer. They were leaving the office at 4 o'clock every day and going, just finding the right balance. Really, if you believe that you're in charge, I think the great mismessage about law practice and law firms is that you're somehow going inside of an organization and you will lose yourself and you have to fall victim to a set of rules that you don't want to abide by. And there will be some rules. But there's ways to find your way around them. And to be your own boss. And if you're your own boss, then you decide what's important and find the right way to balance. Sure.
What about maintaining good health? Like when you're busy, you don't always eat like the best things.
Yeah.
Even if you're stuck sitting and typing and researching, you're not always up and moving around.
Very good question, particularly to me. I probably eat too many snacks. Swallow a lot of aggression, as John Candy said in the movie Stripes. But I think daily exercise should be part of the regimen. For a period of time, in keeping with my extremist personality, I was playing squash with a guy. We would play every day. We'd play 13 or 14 games of squash. We'd be completely exhausted, but man, we were in great shape. And we did that for 5 or 6 years, and that kept me in shape for a while. But eventually, you're exactly right. If you're on the road, you're eating, fast food, or you're eating too much at dinner, you're having a little bit too much wine, etc. That's another area. It'd be a good idea to put down a list and identify family life, health, work. What am I going to do to be in charge of all these? I have tended to let everything happen accidentally. And that's not good. I think you should have a plan. And I see people in my firm who I greatly admire, who are fantastic lawyers, great family people, ride bikes, are in great shape. That's the ideal model. I would not follow me on the health and exercise regimen, but I'm working on it. But it's very important to do that, and hard to do when you're on the road.
Got time for one more.
Yes.
I was just going to ask, during your career, how many times have you had to face serious ethical challenges or dilemmas that you thought you had to seek advice, or maybe within were very hard for you to decide how to handle?
A number of times. Most often, they are conflict issues. Because we're such a large firm and represent so many different clients, there's the possibility of conflicts, particularly between maybe a company we represent and their affiliates and their subsidiaries. And is that a conflict, and can we take the matter? Then there's questions of, we have a client, another client hires us, there's not really an adversity between the two, but there's an adversity of position. And this client's asking us to articulate a legal position or a legal issue that probably this other client wouldn't want us to do, although it's not technically adverse, and what to do in those circumstances. We have, in-house, we have ethics experts that we turn to, but from time to time, we've had to turn elsewhere. In terms of cases, casework where there's been issues of, perjury or not producing documents you should produce, I really haven't run across that. I have, I had a deposition of a client one time in New York, and we were talking about things, and I said, they just asked you, did you get notice of this? And you said no. I said, are you sure of that? Don't you think you got notice of that? He said, oh yeah, I did get notice. I tell you, I'm not going to tell them. I said, no, that's not how we run things. God almighty. So when you go back in there, the first thing you say is, you have something to correct on the record, and you said this, and happily, this person complied with that, and complied with the instructions. So I've had, semi-run-ins with issues like that, but you're going to have ethical issues all the time. You're also going to have times when, in law practice, when you make mistakes. I've had a document project for a client, and one of our principal jobs is to stop privileged documents from being produced. And we had a good team, trained team, and they produced a critical privileged document through an error, probably an error of failing to instruct them sufficiently about what should be screened out. And, major problem, had to go through the process of trying to get it back, and had to go before the client and say, I've screwed up here, but here's what we're going to try to do to turn it around and get it to happen. But it's not all as rosy as I say it is, but I think 98% rosy. But there are little moments of thorns like that, either ethical thorns, mistakes that you make. That's just all part of the journey.
Well, Doc, we're out of time. I appreciate you coming today and